Hey everyone, it's Varouche. Welcome to my channel. I'm excited to be back with you to talk about Jupiter and Saturn today. There's a lot to talk about, so we need to just get into it before the sun sets and I turn into a pumpkin. So hold on one sec, I'm just trying to get my chart up. So what we're going to talk about today is the Jupiter and Saturn aspects alongside their planetary cycle. That began in 2020 and will continue until 2040. There are certain aspects that we're under right now that are super important to be aware of and that are not necessarily that discussed right now, which I don't understand why, but I kind of get it and I'll explain why in a minute. So basically there is a sextile that's forming between, or has formed between Jupiter and Saturn, and they are transiting together in the sky right now. And so they will continue to transit together until about March 8th. And this is a beginning stage for another transit between the two planets that is going to form later on this year and is a hard angle, a square. If you don't know enough about astrology, or if you're just new, a sextile is a favorable aspect. It's a beginning of something. Well, the square is a hard aspect and it suggests tension or conflict. So at the beginning of the year, we are getting this really wonderful energy between the two planets, and not many people are talking about it. The reason people are not talking about it is because the exact sextile, when they actually formed the exact 60 degrees separation, was last year in June. However, at the beginning of this year, when Jupiter was retrograde, it stationed and then moved very slowly, and Saturn moved quickly and moved into this sextile position that's about a 1 degree orb separation. So it's about 59 degrees instead of 60. So it's still a sextile. The two planets are traveling together and they are part of a larger configuration called the planetary cycle that began with the Great Conjunction in 2020. So I want to describe this to you guys. Of course, I forgot to do something, so let me just get my chart ready for the section that I want. Of course I forgot. Okay, so let's do it. Okay, February 6th is the day. Okay, we're going to look at February 6th together, and hopefully my chart works. So before we do the chart, since I've already messed up a little, let's have a little bit of humor. Today's explanation is a little bit connect the dots, kind of me sitting here and acting like telling you guys this connects with this and this connects with that. Actually, I had to edit this video down because the interconnection between the aspects that we're talking about today is so deep. There's so much going on that I had to take out a bunch of content. I'll talk about this in other posts or something, but let's go and explain why this sextile is so important, how it's going to affect us for the next 20 years. So here's my little joke. There's me telling you guys all the astrology. So I hope you guys would get a chuckle with that, about this with me. You know, I have it all figured out. So here I am trying to beat the sunset and tell you all about it. So let's get into it. And I'm excited to be here with all of you. Okay, so we're going to do the astrology and then do a tarot card reading for every sign, and I'll explain what that means for every single sign. Members, I'm doing your videos right now for the extended, like I promised. They ended up being about 20 to 25 minutes each, so you guys are going to get a nice, juicy reading. It's just going to take me extra days, maybe tomorrow, or worse, Tuesday, that I'll publish that, but they're going to be nice long readings about the Aquarian transits, and I do in that video more astrology and then we'll go into a tarot card reading for every single sign. So you'll get a nice big reading in that set, and that's for the all-star members. Okay, so basically let's get into it. So Jupiter and Saturn have formed a sextile. This sextile is going to lead to consequences that are going to last until the 2030s, the 2050s, and the 2060s. I'll tell you about that at the end of the astrology section. So the things that are happening now are really flowing into events that are going to play out for up to the next 40 years. And it's kind of interesting. It's very elegant when you look at how all these transits are in sequence together. Also, for this year, this sextile prepares us for the square between Jupiter and Saturn that begins in summer this year. And so this square is not going to be an easy square, and it's an opening square, which with it will bring an escalation of tension and conflicts. I'll talk about that in a minute too, and what to expect. And so the sextile gives us an opportunity to prepare and to get ready for the square that will form between these two planets in just a few months. So if you haven't been here with us to talk about the planetary cycle, synodic cycle of Jupiter and Saturn, let me catch you up to speed. So basically in 2020 in December, there was a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, okay? And this is a relationship between the two between the two planets that begins a cycle of varying different events. And so what was special about this conjunction, it's called the Great Conjunction because it happens every 20 years, but what was special about it was this conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius really marked the center point or the beginning stage of the air sign sequence. This means that Jupiter and Saturn joined together in earth signs for about 200 years, and now they have begun to join in the air signs for about 200 years. So when we're talking about age of Aquarius and kind of talking about how that's relevant astrologically, aside from sort of the metaphysical how do I say this, lore that has emerged from theosophy in the late 19th century, this is a part of the transition. The fact that these two middle planets, because they are not the inner planets, they're not the outer planets, they're in the middle of the solar system. These two middle planets are joining together now in air signs for about 200 years. There is a little bit of overlap. In 1981, for example, they joined, I think, at the end of Virgo and then transitioned into Libra. There was some kind of overlap there. And in 2060, technically, they will come together in Gemini at 0 degrees. However, they will make their approach in Taurus, so at the last degrees of Taurus. So we're literally in the middle part of the transition phase, 1981 on the one side, and then 1960 conjunction on the other. And so, but the conjunction in 2020 was really the central point where they joined at 0 degrees Aquarius. So to understand what the sextile represents, let's talk a little bit about what Jupiter represents in Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus has a lot to do with the expansion of monetary issues, physical issues. And so I don't want you to think about that as good or bad. It can be either or. Jupiter is a positive, benefic influence, and so therefore we are hoping that it's going to bring light and improvements for us in a material sense, but it can bring difficulties. I don't want to talk about mundane astrology too much. Mundane astrology is the version of astrology that has to do with politics and governments and things. However, when we're talking about these large cycles, it's really important. It's a good practice to kind of use world events to give you an impression of what's going on, right? So Jupiter in Taurus has a lot to do with expansion of issues of a monetary sense in the world. And this will happen in your life as well, where monetary issues that are outstanding, things that you need to address, or opportunities in your life become very big in this capacity. And so it's not just about money, the second house, of course, but I think in the context of the relationship of Saturn and Jupiter and how that affects our life in relation to the world, I think it's important to consider money first and foremost. So what we're seeing things in world news, we see issues to do with trade and sort of, what's the word for it? Like the Red Sea crisis, issues to do with, transport of goods, shortages of things. That's all Jupiter and Taurus expanding on the issues that have, how do I say this, already been dormant. That we've been dealing with. So Jupiter and Taurus expands monetary things. It does bring opportunities, and it does bring opportunities to fix these things. You see, with the Red Sea crisis or any other, issue of global trade, these issues did not happen while Jupiter entered Taurus. These are pre-existing issues that have been unaddressed, that have reached some level of inability to be managed properly. And so people are suffering because of them. So the fact that they are now being addressed, and some of that is problematic, some of it is messy, is like a feature of Jupiter and Taurus. So I'm hopeful that some of these things will get addressed, and some of the needs that people have will be addressed as well. Taurus is also very closely linked to like World War II and that transition in a modern sense. Also the stock market crash and the Great Depression. Those are very like Taurus connected things. And so I'm not going to talk about this in this video today, but what it has to do with, we may be feeling the consequences of a world that once was, the imperialism, the consequences of colonialism, and all these different things. So when we're seeing these things rise up and become issues in the news and around the world, maybe the reason they're rising up is because we need to address them, so it may be a positive thing. So Jupiter and Taurus on a personal level also brings you attention to your resources and gives you opportunities to grow in your resources and the things that you possess. But likewise, any dormant issues that you may have, outstanding responsibilities, may get very big, and especially as it forms aspects to different transits, more notably in Aquarius than in Pisces, Saturn here. It may trigger certain events in your life. If you want to hear more about this, and I spoke about this indirectly in my last video, you want to watch the video on the Aquarius season, where I talked about the squares that will be forming between Jupiter and Aquarian transits. So we are going to be experiencing like quite a bit of aspects between inner planets transiting Aquarius now, and they will trigger some of these dormant issues in our lives that we have to address. And I want you to be positive and excited about them, because these are opportunities to fix things. And I shared with you guys that I had several different things come up that I didn't know how to deal with, and suddenly I had the resources and the wherewithal to be able to address those things well. So I want you to be hopeful. And so this is a good energy between Jupiter and Saturn. And so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but in case somebody's watching for the first time today, we should cover this. So Saturn in Pisces is actually another energy and I'm really summarizing what I think the kernel of it is. I think it really has to do with breaking down our preconceived ideas and belief systems. And specifically, I think that it's really targeting religious beliefs and religious hypocrisy. We've seen that in the global news with a lot of breakdown of colonialism that was backed by religious beliefs, the confrontation of churches weaponizing religion in order to suppress people, people questioning their religious beliefs, asking if they truly believe what they believe or if it's just a byproduct of other needs that they're trying to fulfill, namely social connection with other people. So I think Saturn and Pisces, it's all about our confrontation. Like, is religion antiquated? All religions. Like, are we living in the past when we are saying that we believe in certain gods and we have certain practices? Are we actually on autopilot and doing it for other reasons? Or is this actually our true belief? So Saturn and Pisces, I think, will be a big confrontation of that right to the end. This is playing out in the global, but it's also playing out for us personally. So we have Jupiter that is addressing financial things and bringing those up to the surface, making them bigger. And Saturn is confronting, ideological or religious, mostly religious beliefs, I think. And specifically mostly to the Abrahamic religions, which are the religions of, I guess, the West. I'm not trying to be normative or something like that. It's just a historical observation. Specifically, those three religions are experiencing a lot of pushback for when people are exploiting them for the wrong reasons, right? So you may be experiencing that in your personal life where you're actually kind of like questioning your own beliefs or questioning like what you believe in, what religions you believe in, and like how that affects your larger interaction with the rest of us. Like, what is your motivation for being that faith? Like, what is your motivation for doing those things? Okay. And is it fair? All the questions around that. So we've talked about this in other videos. If you haven't heard me talk about it, we can go and watch those videos. I've talked a lot about Saturn and Pisces already. So we have this sextile that has formed on the heels of the 2020 conjunction. And so, like I said, I don't know why other people haven't really talked about this so much, but I do know. And the reason for this is in June 19th, 2023, Saturn and Jupiter formed the exact sextile. So this is when it was in a perfect sextile, 0 degrees orb, and it locked in. And so that happened last year. And when we look at dates, you want to look back to last year, what was going on for you in June 2023, and see if anything was coming up for you. Just to jot your memory, what was happening in terms of the astrology, Pluto was squaring Jupiter at almost the same degree. So Jupiter was actually in the same degree in June of last year, and it was squaring Pluto, and Pluto was squaring the nodes at that time because they had just entered into Libra and Aries. And so it was a very intense time, I would say, under this aspect. And so I think a lot of in terms of mundane astrology or political views, I think what happened was that a lot of these movements, anti-imperial, anti-colonial movements, really rose up. We saw this in West Africa. We saw this in France. We even saw this in Hawaii when the fires got going. And even though, a lot of exploitation happened in that region when the fire happened, there was a big pushback and there was a huge community uproar against being imposed upon or controlled or exploited. So even if there wasn't a great amount of ability to fight back on the colonialism there, or the imperialism there, the people there did push back. So it was kind of like a starting point. And that kind of illustrates how the sextile works. It's an opening sextile, meaning it's the first sextile since the conjunction. So it's the first time that Saturn and Jupiter formed an angle. And so it opens up the issues that had begun or had been planted when they formed the conjunction in Aquarius. So in December 2020, they joined. A new cycle began in air to do with society, Aquarian themes, society, groups of people, a shift from Capricorn, this very kind of material, centralist energy, to the diffused, fragmented energy of Aquarius. And so when the sextile opened up between Saturn and Jupiter last year, we had this huge pushback and transformation by people who felt oppressed. Now, this is like global politics, whatever, but you as well may have experienced a new sense of freedom, or at least an idea of, any kind of freedom that you need to seek for yourself, be it in your relationships, but most likely it probably had to do with your relationship to the world at large. So who are you in the world, and what is your position in it, and how has the world shortchanged you? Are you a minority? Are you one of the protected categories? In Canada, it's a specific term for like gender, religion, race, all these different things. Sexual orientation. Are you one of these categories, and how is your life affected by it? On a side note, this is all happening at the same time as Chiron is under massive transits all year. So that's very important, because Chiron, of course, is talking about identity in Aries. So we're having this like real awakening here with the sextile that I like a lot. But in this year, at the beginning of the year, Jupiter was retrograde and stationed direct. And so basically what happened was when a planet turns direct, it moves slower. And so even though Saturn is further out than Jupiter and is slower than Jupiter, it was able to catch up and form almost a sextile within 1 degree orb. And so as Jupiter's velocity is speeding up, this is perceptual velocity, the way that we're seeing it, they travel together for about 2.5 months. And so that sextile is over us. And so that's very important, because this opening up of energy from that conjunction, the first stage of the planetary cycle, allows us to explore possibilities and avenues, new spaces to be, new opportunities to grow our wealth, Jupiter and Taurus, and new spaces for our new beliefs, our new sense of self. Do you believe in another deity? Are you agnostic? Are you atheist? Do you realize that you've been dancing a dance, a cultural dance with a religious community, because you're afraid to be alone, or because you're afraid because you feel you need a job and that's your way to it? So you may be empowered at this time to seek a more healthy space for you. I'm not saying religious communities are not healthy. I'm just saying that for those people for who they are not healthy, for people who are limited by their social environment, this sextile of resources expanding, Jupiter in Taurus and Saturn in Pisces, the breakdown of antiquated religious beliefs in Pisces, is giving you opportunities to find a landing for that. And so this sextile continues until March 8th. So we have this sextile, and that's what we're going to focus on in your all sign reading today. And so it's a very nice kind of energy. And so I just want to ask you guys if you want to comment and like the video. If it makes sense to you. I haven't posted very much. I haven't posted very much. So if you like my content and you want to see it again, then you make sure you want to comment and like, because that tells the algorithm to send more videos from me to you. So there's a lot more coming, and I kind of stuck in this video because I really think it's important, this sextile. I think that in a year and a decade that is filled with a lot of harsh energies that are coming up, energies of change, transformation, and reformation, I think that it's very helpful for us to have the focus on some energies that will be helpful, some elevating energies, and this is definitely one of them. So it's an empowering energy. I'm not going to get into why, but it's really deeply, deeply connected with other transits that are happening. So imagine like dominoes, and this is with my little joke, this is where it plays in, and I want to show you guys again. It kind of like it is the game of dominoes, and one connects to the other. And I definitely will put out content explaining this again. I think that because of the intricacy of the different transits involved, I think I'm going to have to write it out somehow so people can read it, as opposed to a video format. I just think it's going to be too complicated for you guys to, for anyone, even myself, or other astrologers to listen to and fully see the nuance. So I'll make like a chart or something and graph it out for you guys so you can see the elegant kind of interplay of the transits. So we get this really beautiful beginning to the start of the year in the context of Jupiter and Saturn, but later this year they will begin to form these squares. And so squares are challenge aspects. This is when a conflict of interest arises between Saturn and Pisces and Jupiter as it enters into Gemini. And we'll talk about this in the future, but all you need to know right now is that this is the context that you're moving into. This is what you need to prepare yourself for, that in August 19th, we will see the first square between Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter will be at 17 degrees Gemini by then. Jupiter moves really, really fast, by the way. It's just when it turns retrograde, it covers a huge amount of area as well. So it can go really fast into the next sign and then just scoots right back into the other sign again. So we'll see first a square between Jupiter and Saturn on August 19th. This is when Saturn will be retrograde. And then on December 24th, at the end of the year, we will see the second Saturn-Jupiter square. This is when Jupiter will be retrograde. And then the final square between Jupiter and Saturn in this sequence will be on June 15th, 2025, next year. And this is really important to understand what's happening, because that square will happen when Saturn is at 1 degree Aries, so in the next sign, and Jupiter will be in the 1st degree of Cancer. And so this square is very important to understand what is happening, because these three squares, the first square, Saturn is retrograde. The second square, Jupiter is retrograde. And the third square, we are finally transitioning into cardinal signs from fixed signs. So the first squares are happening in fixed sign energy, in mutable sign energy, not fixed sign, in Pisces and Gemini. And then once we finish this whole sequence, we end up in cardinal signs. And this leads me to another observation. This transition from mutable fixed into cardinal is really important to the next 10 years. As the planets move into cardinal signs, Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter, there is a lot of the things that are happening now below the surface that are sort of grumbling, nothing's really, it's kind of like happening, but not quite really. That's when things will really accelerate, when the planets, especially the big planets, move into the cardinal signs. So that final square between Jupiter and Saturn is going to likely lead to an outpouring of energy or consequences to what's happening now. So in the context of this opening sextile between Jupiter and Saturn, it's really important for us to know that right now we're really getting ready for next year. We're really getting with some good energy as these planets are harmoniously working together. We're preparing ourselves for some challenges, and we're getting for the transition adjustments that we may not want to make, conflicts of interest that will arise when things start changing. So what I'm telling you in a personal way, get ready and use this energy now to grow and expand. If you have belief systems that you need to let go of, it'll be much easier for you to let go of them now than later. So sit with yourself, try to understand what's happening. I would say in terms of financial things with Jupiter and Taurus, don't back off of financial opportunities now. Things are really going to change. So really dive deep into this energy and use it well. So a lot of this stuff has connections through eclipses. So I want to tell you about a couple eclipses that are very important that are coming up. So in 2022, we had an eclipse at 10 degrees of Taurus. This was a new moon eclipse on April 30th, 2022. And so this has already happened, but this sextile is in sequence of this without talking about everything else that's going on, the stuff that I'm leaving out. So basically the April 30th eclipse, it's a new moon eclipse in Taurus, happened really with the onset of the beginning stages of the war in Ukraine. This is a part of that larger destabilization that's happening in the West. So we'll talk about what the destabilization is all about, and we've talked about it a lot, so let's not repeat it here. Just understand that this sequence of the sextile between Saturn and Jupiter is really connected to everything that's happening in the world around us. And so there is another eclipse that is happening at 8 degrees Taurus this year on April 29th, 2024. And when I look at this eclipse, and we'll talk about this a lot more, this eclipse is really reminding me of the eclipses in October of 2023. So when the new moon eclipse and then the full moon eclipse in Taurus, there was a new moon eclipse in October 2023, and this is when the war in the Levant, and I'm trying to use neutral language because I don't want to comment on it in this video specifically. So the war in the Levant started under the new moon eclipse at the beginning of October, and then the second eclipse happened, and then that's when there was retaliation and a response to the initial conflict that had arisen. So again, I'm not trying to point the finger. I'm just describing that the first eclipse sparked the first action in the region, and then the second eclipse was a follow-through and a response. This is a part of this larger cycle of destabilization, a conflict of interest between different regions, and so these eclipses are happening right where Jupiter is now. I think that's a good thing, and I'm really hopeful. The fact that Jupiter is here is a good thing, is what I'm trying to say. Right now, Hamas is reviewing some kind of ceasefire agreement that may last for, I don't know if it's 6 weeks or 6 months, but I'm hoping that for the people that are affected, that it is accepted and that they find some kind of resolution, to solve this issue so that people stop being hurt. But anyway, so Jupiter is here right in the area where there's going to be an eclipse in April, and that the earlier eclipse, the new moon eclipse that will happen, or excuse me, the full moon eclipse that will happen earlier in April before, it really feels like a similar sequence to the one that is happening in October, that happened in October of 2023. I'm really hopeful that this sequence will find some type of solution to these issues. And when we're talking about the influence of a sextile between Saturn and Jupiter, that's a very positive influence. So it's giving us some hope. So without getting into like long range things too much, I really believe that the things that are happening now are pretext to things that are going to last for 20 or 40 years. So I told you guys that there's a lot of talk of Armageddon now. I have a strong feeling that this is going to be a lot of back and forth for a long time, okay? And with a lot of damage, a lot of people getting hurt. But I also think that the real chaos, World War II sort of stuff may happen in the later decades, so not now. I don't, how do I say this? My impression is that we are not exhausted yet to the level that people were exhausted then. So I think that this is the beginning. And that's a positive thing to say. What I'm saying by that is that we have the opportunity to change and to affect situations in positive directions. So even though we feel exhausted now with, the illness that's happened and other things that have been going on, inflation, I think it's important to put things in perspective and really consider that even though we are tired, in comparison to the things that were happening in the interwar periods and leading up to them, I do think that many of us live much more comfortable, cozy lives than what people were going through back then. And that's not to minimize what people are going through. That's to just say that I think we don't want to push it. We don't want to say, I'm so exhausted now, and take things for granted. I think that we have the opportunity to change. We have the opportunity to resolve situations, to recognize that we have yet still things to lose. So if we engage in conflict, we will lose more. So it's really important to be aware of this. And so the astrology, we want to be very mindful of the energy now. And I believe that the implications of our actions now will play out in the next 20, 30 years. And we have a way to save things or improve things. I don't think this is Armageddon. I don't think this is that day in which things go to its worst. And that is not to be dismissive of the things that are happening now. That is in order to encourage people to try to improve circumstances for themselves and for the world, because the astrology that's lined up may lead to furthering consequences and worsening consequences, things that are unimaginable to us, things that we've never lived through, and things that will not be so easy to remediate. So while we still have the resources we do, we should be mindful and respectful of them and try to build harmony. And I think this Jupiter-Saturn sextile is actually promoting that. The reason I think that the really bad or intense consequences are not coming till later has a lot to do with some eclipses in Taurus. So in the 18th century, when America was being born, because let's face it, this world is, how do I say this? America has been the it kid on the block in the world stage since its inception. It was always this new hub. It's you guys are the news. I'm from Canada, but the whole new world was like the news. Like everybody was focused on it. So the focus has been on America since about the 18th century, and that is when there was a bunch of eclipses in Taurus that kind of happened alongside its inception, right? And its rise to power. And so when we look at eclipses in this area of Taurus, right, where Jupiter is now, we see a series of eclipses at 5 degrees Taurus in 2031, 2050, and 2069. So in terms of eclipses, for you to understand the patterns, it's not how do I say this? It's not like a synodic cycle, like the cycle of Venus. It's not precise. And so the fact when there is a decade or a few decades in which there are the same eclipse to the degree, 5 degrees Taurus, it is significant. And the fact that there was eclipses here in the 18th century and there are eclipses here now signifies to me that there is a full circle event that we are in and that we're coming up to. This does not mean it's the end of the U.S. I don't think it's the end of the U.S., but I do think that you're in a reformation. I think that there are long-standing social and civil issues that need to be addressed. Wrong people have come into power. They have stolen money from your country and your citizens. We need a change. And so what I'm saying by saying all this is this sextile that's happening now is in the context of all this change, and it's giving you an opportunity to grow and elevate. So that's pretty much the majority of the information I wanted to share with you today. There's like 3 small things I want to highlight for you to look back on or to reflect on, and I will post everything on Instagram. I've started posting on Instagram like dates and stuff, so if I say dates, likely they will go up on Instagram soon. Okay. So when we're talking about the sextile here, I found a really interesting sequence in 2011 and 2012 that really mirrors this sextile. There was another sextile between 2 different transits, Jupiter and another transit that you may be aware of. So at the beginning of the video, I pointed out to you guys that Chiron was deeply activated at the beginning of the video. I said Chiron was activated in the midst of all this. This has to do with identity issues. In 2011 and 2012, Chiron was actually in Pisces, right about where Saturn is now. And Jupiter was actually in Taurus in the same position. And so over the space of about a year, about less than a year, 6 months, Chiron and Jupiter formed a sextile between Pisces and Taurus. And so you may want to look at the following dates to see if there is a synchronicity in your life, and or if you know about world events that in your region that mirror things that are happening now to these dates. Let me know in the comments. So on July 2nd, 2011, there was a sextile at 5 degrees of Taurus between Chiron in Pisces and Jupiter in Taurus. On December 7th, there was another sextile at 0 degrees of Pisces and Taurus between Jupiter and Chiron. And then on February 15th, 2012, there was the third and final sextile between Chiron and Jupiter at 4 degrees of Taurus. So this happens because both planets turn retrograde and then one catches up to the other, just like we saw in the square between Jupiter and Saturn that will form over the next year. Same kind of idea. So just to go over the planetary cycle, just so you're clear. First, we have a conjunction in 2020 at 0 degrees Aquarius. Then we have the first opening sextile in 2023 in June. Now we have the approach. They're traveling together. They're not to the degree, but they're within 1 degree orb of each other. They're traveling together. You see, Jupiter today is at 7 degrees 54 minutes. Saturn is at 7 degrees 5 minutes. So it's within 1 degree of each other. They're traveling together after Jupiter's retrograde cycle. And so next we prepare as Jupiter enters Gemini into the opening square. So the next transit. So from this position, from this sextile ahead of us for the next 20 years until they join together again, we will have still 2 squares. We will have an opposition when Saturn and Jupiter oppose each other. Those are hard angles, so those will bring up issues and stir up conflict. But then we'll also get a couple trines, which is going to be nice as well. So this is a big cycle. It lasts 20 years. And so this sextile is a part of this awakening process. I hope I explained it well. I hope it helps you understand. And it's not really about world politics. It's about you understanding the world and knowing where you fit into it. For perspective, in 2037, we will see the final sextile. This is called the closing sextile between Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn will be in Gemini by then, and Jupiter will be in Leo. And so this will be the final phase, kind of the last lucky break in the things that are emerging now. So pay attention, look to 2037, and maybe you will see some parallels. One last thing, if you really want to look back in history, back to the 1900s, way back when, the 20th century, so there was another sextile that I think might be quite formative to the events that are happening right now in the world and in your life. In 1970, between April 12th and April 14th, there was a sextile between Saturn in Taurus and the North Node in Pisces. So the North Node was in Pisces and Saturn was in Taurus. This happened at 9 degrees. Saturn and Jupiter will transit together. They're transiting now together between January and March, between 5 degrees to about 10 degrees. So 9 degrees is right in that sequence. And so that sextile between Saturn that was in Taurus and the North Node in Pisces may have some connection to the things that are happening now. Following that Saturn North Node sextile, there was a sextile between Mercury and the North Node, and that happened on the 14th. So they were traveling together in Taurus at that time, forming sextiles to Pisces. Just to remind you what happened, and this is a part of a bigger conversation about what's happening now, the U.S. finally dropped the last aspects of the gold standard. So they started removing the gold standard in 1933, but they didn't completely drop the gold standard until 1973. So in 1970, there was a lot of this kind of breakdown. And in the events of last year, when Jupiter and Saturn formed its first sextile in June, that was the beginning of de-dollarization, which was a fundamental shift in world where the dollar was getting unpinned and abandoned for other resources. Now the dollar, how do I say this? The dollar's really strong. And so when you heard news like that, it's only a small portion of its value but just the fact that there was other avenues for people to pay and other ways for people to exchange value was in itself significant. So it was really important moment last year. So the connection between 1970 and 2023, 2024 was this change in the function of the American dollar. The other main thing, and this is a side note, there was an established relationship that grew deeper between OPEC countries and the United States. There was certain types of agreements to exchange, agreements to form some kinds of alliances in the 70s that emerged exchange of protection for exclusive trade, things like that. And this has been the backbone of Western run order. So the fact that in 2023 that began to really fragment and be challenged by other systems is significant. So that's how I see 1970 connected to now. This does not mean America's falling apart. This does not mean it's the end. It's just suggesting that there is an adjustment to some of the things that we've been doing up until now. I just looked at the time and I really tried to get this done quickly, but it's been an hour. So maybe I can, because I'm going to run out of time because of the sunshine. So maybe we can come back and do this tomorrow and do an all sign and consider how the sextile between Saturn and Jupiter will play out in your chart, because I'm not going to be able to finish all of your readings, all the sign readings by the end of sunset. So I tried my best. I practiced this and it took 20 minutes, but once I started talking to you guys in live, then I just over explained again or something. I don't know. I hope this was helpful in understanding the planetary cycle of Jupiter and Saturn. I do think that this transit is one of the most benefic and positive ones of the year, so I'm surprised other people are not highlighting it in the context of the things that are happening. For you personally, I hope it gives you lift and life in your life, empowerment, and some, look for opportunities now, look for resolutions to the things that are happening, or just look for those opportunities. So we'll talk about how that will impact your chart tomorrow. I hate to change the plan, but I literally thought I had so much fun explaining this to you guys. You guys know I get passionate about it. So 15 minutes is enough for today, not because of my energy levels or something, but because of the sunset. And we'll do an all sign tomorrow. And members, I'm doing your videos and they're going really well. I really like this series, so I'm excited to post them for you. I've already got a few done. I'll get more done. I want to post them all together, so you'll have a video from me very soon. So thank you guys, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this information. It was just a little bit nerdy, but and if you have questions, ask them in the description, because I can answer them tomorrow when we do the all sign. So if something I said wasn't clear or didn't make sense, please let me know and I'll explain it tomorrow. Okay? Thank you guys so much for watching. Elle, thank you for becoming a member. We'll see you soon. Okay? Take care. Bye.